Hi everyone, welcome to a special episode of A Stitch in Time. Before I release my first regular episode of 2023, I thought it might be fun to look back and see what I got up to in 2022 and also to give you a preview of my crafting plans for the upcoming year. If you are watching for the first time, welcome. My name is Carol. My Ravelry name is Knits and Pearls, and I live in British Columbia, Canada, not too far from Vancouver. So as 2021 was drawing to a close, I took a good, long, hard look at all of the yarns I had acquired over the years. And I decided that for me, 2022 was going to be the year of the stash. My goal was to craft mainly from stash and limit, but not completely eliminate new yarn purchases. I had to be realistic about it and make it, attainable, make my goal attainable. Now, many of you were up for the same challenge, and so I hosted a make-along in the A Stitch in Time podcast Ravelry group, which was comprised of a couple of different elements. The first was a year-long chatter thread called the Year of the Stash, and the other was a monthly personal sock yarn club. So we had a make-along for each month in which some of us attempted to knit up a pair of socks from stashed yarn. And I just want to thank all of you who participated in one way or another in those two aspects of the make-along. It was just wonderful to see the Ravelry group really come alive and just to see the community that was built up over the course of the year. And I don't know about you, but I found it really motivating to see what everyone was making from their stash, and definitely inspired me to continue to make things from my own. So I don't always sort of look back at the previous year and analyze all the statistics of how much I knit and how much yarn I used and all of those things. But I thought it might be fun this year just to see how successful my goal turned out to be. So here's a few facts and figures for you. Over the course of the year, I worked on 51 projects. Now, some of those were projects that had carried over from the previous year, and some are ones that I cast on near the end of 2022. I finished 46 of them, so I think that's a pretty good average. And while this figure is only approximate because once again it considers some projects that may have been partially knit in 2021 and some that aren't yet finished, and so the totals aren't recorded. But according to Ravelry, I used up somewhere in the neighborhood of 14,000 meters of yarn. So that feels pretty awesome, I have to say. I was surprised by those total figures for the year. I know I mostly knit a lot, but it's just, that's almost, a project a week when you look at 51 projects that are being worked on. So for the Personal Sock Yarn Club, I did complete all 12 pairs of socks that I wanted to, and I also completed 10 more pairs of socks. Now, I do always have a pair of stockinette socks on the go, so in a way that's not too surprising, but that sort of averaged out to almost to a month, which did surprise me a bit. So for the Year of the Stash, in other words, projects that used stash yarn, I worked on 40 projects and I completed 39 of those. I also took part in the Fiber Nymph Dye Works Meomel, which was the Make It Your Own Make-Along, and I worked on a total of 24 projects for that mel, and I finished 23. And I can tell you that the one project that didn't get counted in the year of the stash as finished, or the Miomel as finished, is my ranunculus. I'm not even sure that sweater's ever going to get done. I got the yoke completed and separated for the sleeves, and then I kind of lost interest. So it remains to be seen whether that's a project that I'm going to pick up again or one that I'm just gonna frog. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. I participated in 3 mystery shawl knit-alongs this year. That's the most I've ever done, I think. The first was the Miss May shawl from Helen Stewart of Curious Handmade. The second was the Mountain Musings M-Cowl from Lisa K. Ross of Paper Daisy Creations. And finally, like many of you, I knit Twists and Turns by Stephen West of West Knits. I also completed 4 adult sweaters and 1 baby sweater. I knit Ashland, which I'm wearing right now. Sorry, I'm reading Mountain Musings in my notes, looking at the wrong line. Throwback Thursday, Yellow Brick Rodeo. Those are both by Mary Annarella of Lyrical Knits, I think it is. And also Simple Stripes by Suvi Sinova. I was somewhat obsessed with the pattern Brighten Up by Lisa K. Ross and knit 4 of those cowls, 2 as gifts and 2 for myself. And near the end of the year, I also became obsessed with knitting Christmas baubles. And finally, I wove 2 scarves this year, which I'm kind of disappointed about. I wish I had used my loom more, and I am hoping to do that more in the upcoming year. So before we proceed to what I have in store for 2023, I thought I would just show you a few of my highlights from the year. So as I mentioned, this is Ashland. It is a sweater by Julie Hoover. It is knit from Brooklyn Tweed Loft. And even though I wouldn't say this is necessarily my favorite sweater of the year, it's the one I'm most proud of. If you've ever bought Brooklyn Tweed Loft or looked at Brooklyn Tweed Loft, you will know that it's on the pricey side, and so it is quite expensive to buy a sweater's quantity. I had purchased this yarn several years ago, and I had knit part of one sweater, didn't like the way it worked out. I just always had it in my stash thinking that I really needed to use it up. And I was delighted to finally find a pattern that really appealed to me. And then once I chose the pattern, I went through a number of different color changes for the color work. I did a lot of swatching on it and finally came up with a combination that I was happy with. And I'm really glad I persevered because I do like the way the colors worked out. Maybe I'll bring my sleeve up so that you can get a good look at the colors that I chose. So it's the golden color, this orange, and this purple. So knitting the sweater too was somewhat challenging. I've never knit an overall colorwork sweater. Now, granted, there are bands of stockinette between all the colorwork sections, but there's still a lot of colorwork in this sweater. I also knit it in the round and then steeked for the sleeves. I think that's the first time I've ever done that. And I was really pleased with my seaming job on the sleeves. I think it looked really nice and neat, and I like how all the patterns matched up. The only thing I would say I'm not 100% happy about with this sweater is that it is on the large side, I should say. I believe I knit the smallest size, and I also knew it was supposed to be a little bit oversized. What I wasn't fully aware, and this is totally my fault for not really looking closely at the pattern before I knit it, is that it more or less had A-line shaping rather than the hourglass shaping that I was expecting. And so it does, it is quite a loose sweater. There's a lot of room in it, but it is comfortable, looks good with a pair of jeans, and overall I am happy with how it turned out. So another highlight of this year is my snow melt shawl by Helen Stewart of Curious Handmade. So this is the second time that I've knit this shawl, but this time I really spent a lot of time placing my colors. I did some knitting and unknitting and re-knitting until I got it right. And I love how this turned out. I've had a lot of use out of it this winter. I often will put this over my shoulders first thing in the morning, and in the evenings while I'm knitting. It's just that little bit of an extra layer. For this shawl, I used a half skein set of Fiber Nymph Dye Works Bounce in the Winter Palette colorway. And I just love how all the colors go together. And I'm just very, very pleased with this project. I think this is my most favorite shawl that I've ever knit. And I've knit a lot. So speaking of shawls, as I mentioned, I did take part in the Mountain Musings Mystery Shawl Knit Along this year, and this was just pure joy. I enjoyed every stitch of this make along. I chose my color palette based on a photo that I had taken one winter morning of our mountains that are behind our home, and I found a color palette that almost matched the colors in my photo perfectly. So that was my jumping off point, and I just think it was a really fun pattern to knit and really beautiful. So we started with this square here, which actually turned into a diamond, and then worked all these really fun stitch patterns all the way along the length of the shawl. And every stitched pattern represented a different theme in the your journey up the mountain. And then it finished off with this squared off edge. Now, confession time, I did make an error right here. This line is supposed to look like these two. I am intending to fix that, but I haven't got around to it yet. But all in all, this was definitely a highlight of this year, working on this shawl. And out of the 3 mystery shawls that I did do this year, this is my favorite. I also have quite a bit of yarn left over, so I need to figure out what I'm going to do with that. It's a beautiful wool, I think it's wool, silk, and cashmere, if I remember correctly. It just feels beautiful, it has a lovely sheen to it. So as I mentioned, I was obsessed with the Brighten Up Cowl, which is also by Lisa K. Ross. In fact, I found the Mountain Musings knit along via this pattern. And so this is one of the 2 that I made for myself out of some Sweet Georgia yarns, and then I think 1 or 2 other yarns mixed in there. And this cowl is just so fun to knit. I love the way it plays with color. It's a simple construction, but interesting. And I think it looks really nice on. It's a good size for a cowl. Often I find cowls to be too large. And what I like is that it sits really nicely on your neck, and then it fits really nicely into the neck of a winter coat. So yeah, just love this pattern, and I love it so much that I am going to experiment with fashioning an Afghan square out of this sort of squared off part of the cowl. I think it would be a fun way to use different colors and use some scraps or mini skeins. So I am going to be experimenting with that this year. I'm also trying to decide if it would look best with a light border or with a dark border. So stay tuned for that too, because I haven't had the chance to do some swatching yet, but I'm quite excited about the idea. Probably messed my hair up. Yes, and speaking of obsession, I can't explain why I was so obsessed with making these Christmas baubles this year, but I ended up knitting 16 of them from the 12 Days of Baubles pattern by Stacy Lewis. And I gave them as Christmas gifts, and they were very well received. So I can highly recommend this pattern, or these patterns, I should say. They're the 12 Days of Baubles is actually broken down into 3 sets of 4 patterns. But I can highly recommend them, and she does have some others also if you are up for giving these a try. They are super fun to make, and I can picture myself making some more next year. I did also do some weaving, as I mentioned, this year, and this is, I think, my favorite weaving project that I have done. Now, I'm still a pretty new weaver. I got my loom for Christmas in 2020, and this scarf turned out exactly as I had hoped. What I did is I used my 2021 Winter Magical Holiday Countdown collection from Fiber Nymph Dye Works for the warp, and then I used a skein of self-striping Fiber Nymph Dye Works yarn for the weft. And don't know if the light will catch it or not, but it's the bedazzled base, so it's sparkly. So not only are the colors gorgeous, they also sparkle. And I used the fringe twister I got for Christmas last year to do some twisted fringe on it. So yeah, definitely a highlight from this past year. And finally, I really enjoyed doing the Personal Sock Yarn Club. I tend to get paralyzed with choice when it comes to casting on a new pair of socks. Like I said earlier, I always have a pair of plain stockinette socks on the needles, but I have so many beautiful skeins of sock yarn that it can be really hard to decide which one to cast on next. And so that's why I decided to do a Personal Sock Yarn Club. And then again, a lot of people were interested in following suit, which is why I ended up doing the make along. But I had to wait all year until December to cast on this pair. This is the Sugar Plumbed colorway from Fiber Nymph Dye Works, and I think it's, well, I know it's one of my most favorite of her colorways. I have probably, well, I have lots of her colorways that I really like, but this is in the top 5. And I had fallen in love with it when she first introduced it, and I had managed to acquire a skein, but never found the right time to cast it on. So I remembered that this was in my December bag to open, and I managed to finish them up in time to wear for Christmas Eve this year. So that was one of the highlights from my personal sock yarn club this year. So that brings us to what are my plans for 2023. I'm just gonna turn the page here on my notes. So 2023 is going to be another year of stash. I still have a lot of yarn, and apparently so do you, because a lot of you were interested in continuing with another make along this year. And so once again, it will have two components. The another year of stash will run basically the same way the year of stash did, with a year-long chatter thread, and every month I will draw a winner from the posts that were made in that month. And then rather than confine the idea of a yarn club to just sock yarn and socks, I am this year doing the Yarn of the Month Club. And it will run in a similar but not exactly the same manner as last year's personal sock yarn club. So in anticipation, I have gathered 12 special yarns and put them in this bag. And rather than put them into paper bags and choose them blindly each month, I've decided that I'm going to have some choice and be able to work on what I feel like that month. But I am hoping by the end of the year to have all 12 of these yarns knit up. Mostly knitting. You know, we never know, I might weave or crochet with some of them. Most of what I've chosen are special single skeins, many of which were given to me as gifts. But I also have a set of minis in here, and I have a couple of sets of 2 skeins that go together that I am wanting to use up. So I know we're almost a week into January, and I still haven't decided which of these yarns I'm going to work on for January. So I will do that before I release my next regular episode, and I will share with you what I have chosen. So stay tuned for that. And even though I am not doing a formal make-along for Personal Sock Yarn Club again, I decided to do it again just for myself. And what I've chosen are mainly skeins that I have received as Yarn Club subscriptions. Is that the right word? I was part of the Backyard Birdwatchers Club from Fiber Nymph Dye Works last year. I haven't knit any of those skeins. I received 3 skeins from Sweet Fiber in the fall. Haven't touched them. And then I was part of Sweet Fiber's winter sock club, which I opened over the course of December. And I've only knit with one of those skeins. And so I put I think there was 10 skeins of, 9 or 10 skeins, 9 skeins of sock club sock yarns. My day 25 skein from Fiber Nymph Dye Works Holiday Countdown Collection from 2022. And also just a couple of skeins that I really love that I want to work on. And so a couple of days ago when Cameron, my husband, got home from work, I got him to put them into paper bags, seal them up, and he's numbered them 1 to 12. And so I will be working on these skeins in that order. Now, I haven't decided if I'm going to limit myself to 1 a month or just open them once I finish, bag number 2, open up bag number 3 and get going right away. To be determined. After all, it's my own club, so I can make up my own rules. I'll just see what I feel like at the time, because I don't also want to eliminate the possibility of, you know, working with some other sock yarns that I have in my stash. So it might be just a good balance to open one a month. So we'll see. I'm not sure that I will get 22 pairs of socks knit this year, because I think my Yarn of the Month Club is going to take the place of some of those socks with the projects that I choose. Another make along that I am planning to participate in this year is Fiber Nymph Dye Works Stop Shooting on Yourself, Mel. That's shooting, S-H-O-U-L-D-I-N-G. And the premise of this make along is that as crafters, we often work on things we feel we should be working on. Sometimes instead of things that we really want to work on. I know I'm definitely guilty of that myself. And so this year I'm giving myself permission to be a little bit more selfish. Not that most things I make don't go to me anyway, but I'm just gonna allow myself the permission to just work on whatever is bringing me joy at that time. So I think the Yarn of the Month Club meshes really nicely with this make along, because these are yarns, I'm gesturing down here because that's where they're sitting. These are yarns that are very special to me, and so it will bring me a lot of joy to finally turn them into something other than skeins of yarn. And I also have some other projects that I intend to focus on this year. So 3 of which I have already cast on. One is Dogwood Blossoms by Karen Dimler Lawrence. I got the yarn for this at least a couple of years ago, I think. It is an overall color work cardigan, and I have knit, I would say, about a quarter to a third of the sleeves, and that's it. And so that is a project that I'd really love to see some progress on this year. I'm not going to commit to finishing it. It is a lot of color work, and so that requires knitting time when I can pay a lot of attention and have really good light and have the time to do more than just a row or two. But I am really hoping to devote some time to that this year. I've already cast on Shawn by Elizabeth Doherty. I think I cast that on back in November, and I have had some time over the latter part of the holidays and the beginning of this year to work on it, and I will give you a look at that in my next regular episode. But I just am enjoying that knit so much, and cannot wait to see it come together. Another project that I very recently cast on just after Christmas is the Aurora Cabin Shawl by Stephen West. And this is one that as soon as I saw it after the Twists and Turns was done, I immediately went through my stash and I put together 2 different color palettes for it. Finally decided on one and cast it on, I think it was on the 27th of December. And that has also been a really fun pattern to work on. I am not officially participating in the make-along for this. I'm just knitting it at my own pace, kind of on my own, but I'm really enjoying it a lot. There are a couple of other sweaters that I would like to do this year. The first is Richmond Hill by Mary Pranica. I just bought yarn for this pattern back in November when I was in Victoria visiting my in-laws. I had seen a version of it on the Knit Together with Kim and Jonna. There was a shop model made up in the yarn store in which they record. and I was immediately taken by it, and bought the yarn for it, and I haven't even had a chance to swatch or anything. So I am looking forward to doing some swatching, playing with the colors, deciding which order I want to put them in. As you can see from the picture, it is a sweater with a plain body and colorwork sleeves. And finally, a few years ago, I cast on Hinterland by Jennifer Steingass, and I completed all of the color work on the yoke. But then when I went to try it on, I realized that it was just a little bit too big and a little bit too long. The depth was too long for me. And I think that if I were to attempt it again and just go down a needle size, I think I'll have more success. And so I would love to give this sweater another go. It took me a while to get my colors chosen, and in fact one of the colors that I used in it, I'm making it out of some sweet fiber yarn, and the purple that I had chosen, I had used a different blend of fiber. I had a skein of purple yarn and another yarn base from Sweet Fiber Yarns that I used for it. And then as it turned out, in my winter sock yarn club this year, I received a mini in that same colorway. That's the same yarn base as the rest of the sweater. It's like it was meant to be, and so I will be substituting that mini for the purple in there. And I also think I might see if I can choose a different color for the bottom layer of that color work, because I have since purchased some other minis from Sweet Fiber. So I still have to play a little bit with that, but I am excited with the idea of finally getting that sweater knit, because it is beautiful. And I guess you'll see there sort of seems to be a theme, which was not intentional, but there's a lot of color work that I want to do this year when knitting sweaters. Another thing that I want to do as far as most likely knitting goes, but you never know, it might turn into crochet or weaving, is I still haven't decided for sure what I'm going to make with my 2022 holiday countdown collection from Fiber Nymph Dye Works. What I'm hoping to do is to use it for this Afghan using this square pattern, but I have to experiment a little bit with it. I don't know if I have enough to do a whole blanket. I don't know how much yarn each of the sections takes. I'm thinking, well, if I were to do, say, 3 colors plus a background or outline color, would I have enough of each of my mini skeins to do a center, an outer, and a complete, I guess a center and middle? Aren't middles and centers the same thing? I don't know. And then the outer. So I need to experiment a little bit with that, see how much yarn it takes, and I think that would be really cool. But again, I need time and I need to experiment. I would dearly love to do more weaving this year than I did last year. When I was going through my stash looking for yarns for the Aurora Cabin shawl, I sort of reorganized a lot of my yarn stash, especially my fingering weight yarns, and I ended up pulling out everything that wasn't suitable for socks. You know, the ones that didn't have nylon in them, or that I didn't think would stand up to socks. And I have a whole basket full of yarns that I set aside to weave with. Now, some are actually sets that I had, you know, yarns that I had purchased together or previously put together intending to weave with them. Others are just yarns that I put away knowing that they would be suitable for weaving. But anyway, I'm anxious to jump into that basket. In particular, there are 3 yarns that I bought in a shop on Granville Island in Vancouver this past year. I had seen I can't remember if it was a shawl or a scarf, like it was like a wide scarf or a stole that had been woven up in these yarns, and the dyer happened to be there, and dyer slash weaver, so she was able to tell me how she had woven it. And so I purchased 3 skeins of the fingering weight yarn, and then I had some lace weight black yarn in my stash, which I will use for the weft. So I'll use the fingering weight yarn to warp my loom with, and then I'll weave with this lace weight, which I've never done anything like that before. So I'm really anxious to warp up my loom with that and see how it goes. But I might choose something a little bit simpler just to get my back into the groove of things first. Another couple of crafts that I would like to concentrate on this year a little more. Well, one is cross stitch. I know if you've been watching for a while, you've seen me working on these 2 projects. So this one is a bell pull. It's an autumn theme. I actually have all the yarn and materials to do one for each season, and I haven't even got through the first one yet. So I would like to do that. I've also been working on this beautiful Christmas picture. And again, I have everything I need to do it. I would like to pick that up again this year. I'm not sure the last time I cross-stitched. And finally, back in 2020, when we were going through our, some people call it lockdown, but our self-isolation period, I ended up buying a couple of paint by number kits, and I finished one, and it's now hanging at the cabin. And I started this one but haven't got very far. So when I pulled out this little picture that came with it, I checked the paints. They look like they're still fresh, and so I would like to do a little more painting this year. I quite enjoyed it. But I find I tend to concentrate on knitting at the expense of the other crafts that I like to do. And so this year, I would like to find more of a balance and do more weaving, cross stitch, and painting. So I would love to know what your plans are for 2023. Feel free to share them in the comments. And I'd also love to see what you make this year in the Ravelry group as part of the Another Year of Stash and Yarn of the Month Club make-alongs. So I highly encourage you to come by the Ravelry group and check those out if you think that's something you might be interested in. I'll provide a link to the Ravelry group below. So just read the first post in each of the pertinent threads. That tells you everything you need to know. The Another Year of Stash Mal is as relaxed and unstructured as a make-along can be, but the Yarn of the Month Club does have a few more rules and guidelines. So make sure you read that one over carefully to make sure that you will qualify for prize if that's your aim. So thank you so much for watching. You can look for my first regular episode of 2023 later this week. And in that, I will show you all the projects that I've been working on, and even have a pair of socks that I finished in December. So I hope to see you then. Take care, and happy crafting. Bye.